Good morning. Can you all hear me? Yeah, looks like. Good morning. Minister, ambassadors, dear guests, both here in the room as well as online. I wish you all very welcome to this seminar today to celebrate the 30 years of EEA Cooperation. My name is Sigríður Valgeirsdóttir. I'm Director General at the Ministry of Higher Education, Science and Innovation. And I will take care of the first part of this seminar. I want to mention that this seminar, and actually the whole event today and the celebration, is organized by Icelandic Center of Research, better known as RANNIS, the EU delegation to Iceland, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, and the Ministry of Higher Education, Science and Innovation. I want to use the opportunity to thank you all for the very good work in preparation for this event today. Now 30 years of fruitful collaboration. This gives us the opportunity to look back and look at all our achievements, and also to review the prospects of the future collaboration. And this is exactly what we are going to do today. We will start, the first part will have the focus on the achievements and the prospects of the future collaboration. And then the second part, the second hour of our meeting today, then Björn Malmquist, reporter from the Icelandic Broadcasting Service, he will take over and lead us through panel discussions on the EU programs and opportunities and challenges combined with the programs we are participating in. But let's move to the agenda. We are honored by the distinguished speakers and panelists who are here with us today. And we start with two seminars in a row. First, our Minister for Foreign Affairs, Ms. Þórdís Kolbrún Reykjavík Gylfadóttir. She will give an opening talk. Right after her seminar, we will have a talk through video. Ms. Iliana Ivanova, EU Commissioner now I have to remember, Education, Research, Innovation, Youth and Culture in Brussels. She will give a presentation through video. So let's start. Dear Minister Þórdís Kolbrún, welcome to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Very good to see all of you, and good to be back. Ambassadors, distinguished guests, good morning. And I'm so sorry to say this here, Lucy, but Ambassador of the EU here in Iceland, Lucy, it's her birthday today. So let's start with that. Well, first, allow me to start by thanking the organizers of today's event, the Icelandic Center for Research, RANNIS, the delegation of the EU to Iceland, the Ministry of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, as well as my team in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs for preparing this seminar and today's event. This is a joyful occasion, 30 years of EEA cooperation. In a world where the future of international relations is ever more unstable, uncertain, unpredictable, it is indeed important to appreciate and safeguard those forms of cooperation that have served us very well and are still delivering at full speed. The EEA agreement is a very good example of exactly that. For 30 years, the EEA has granted Iceland solid and seamless access to a market of more than 450 million people and 23 million companies in 30 countries. Today, Europe is Iceland's largest export market, and the EEA has contributed significantly to Iceland's growth and prosperity. During this period, the EEA cooperation has been assessed and looked at from different perspectives in Iceland. We have not only assessed the impact of implementing the legal framework in areas covered by the agreement, but also the commercial, political, and economic aspects of our EEA cooperation. The conclusion of all these assessments is that the EEA agreement was literally a game changer for Icelandic society, and that the benefits of joining the agreement are unquestionable. Here I'm not only referring to the increase in GDP and households' disposable income driven by the greatly increased exports. The EEA agreement has also brought us important reforms in the legal and competitive environment, both for consumers and the industry, as well as numerous opportunities in the field of science, research, development, and education. There are countless examples of rights we enjoy based on the EEA agreement in our daily lives. The EEA cooperation is not only about market access and trade. Various projects funded by the EEA grants that we will hear more about this morning is another important aspect of this. Being part of programs such as Horizon, Erasmus+, Creative Europe, and many others has transformed Iceland's innovation, research, and development, and had positive impact on education, culture, and youth cooperation. We make substantial financial contributions to the programs, but we are net gainers in the competition in open bids. The current program period is no exception, where predictions show we are heading for yet another record. These great results truly testify to the strength and competitiveness of our entrepreneurial environment here in Iceland, culture sector and education system, our R&D sector and enterprise. Being part of these programs has also greatly strengthened our knowledge and our networks, which has been pivotal to Iceland's advancements. In addition to the benefits which I have briefly described, the broad economic gain of market access and the many advantages of the EU program participation, the EEA has also strengthened the individual rights, ranging from health insurance and lower roaming charges while traveling to the numerous opportunities we enjoy in the EEA area based off the four freedoms. But do we perhaps take all of this for granted? According to Statistics Iceland, 40% of the population were born after 1994. If we count in those who were children at the time when the EEA agreement was negotiated, let's say 10 years and younger, which actually includes me, we can argue that more than half of Icelanders only know Iceland as part of the EEA. As part of the internal market, and as part of the EEA area where Icelanders can travel and study, where they can seek, work abroad, settle down, and buy a house or start a company. My point is that nothing I have mentioned can ever be taken for granted. All of this is the result of deliberate policy choices and true implementation. That said, we must of course be thoughtful and critical of how the EU and the EEA is developing, even vigilant if we need to be. For example, debating the changes to the climate legislation and the ETS system with all its hefty measures to work towards our shared climate goals. While these goals are truly important for our future, we cannot but wonder if the remedies prescribed are really realistic, given the current state of technological solutions and the availability of alternative fuels. We will no doubt see rapid advances here, but I do think it is important to be realistic and sensible. We can thus only hope that the legislation creates the right incentives to speed up development and we can facilitate new and necessary renewable power generation. However, if it only levies great costs to our citizens and economies without meaningful gains for the climate, without being totally realistic, the pendulum could easily swing back. And this is a political challenge that I think we have to be very aware of. Dear guests, anniversaries are also an occasion to look ahead, to gaze into the famous crystal ball and ask, where are we headed? Will the EEA continue to be a solid basis for our trade and cooperation with the EU and its member states, or will we struggle to maintain the EEA in a rapidly evolving world? Is the EEA at 30 perhaps headed for an early midlife crisis at 40? I don't believe so, and I truly hope it's not. But today's EU is not the same as the one we signed the EEA agreement with 30 years ago. Since 1994, the number of EU member states has more than doubled. It has grown from 12 to 27, not forgetting that the UK has left the Union. New policy areas have emerged, many of which impact the EEA. And Russia's illegal war on Ukraine is not only horrible as such, but also a serious attack on international law and on the rule-based international system. The political and economic context has shifted considerably over the last 30 years, and it will continue to evolve. As an example, EU enlargement is likely to continue in the coming years. In 10 years, we might see a European Union of over 30 countries, including Ukraine as a large new member state. This will certainly test the inner mechanics of the EU and perhaps lead to new formats of multi-speed Europe. Furthermore, the EU-EEA single market can be expected to develop further in the coming years. The recent Letta report makes concrete proposals for the strengthening of the single market, including in financial services, energy, and electronic communication. The report makes the point that Europe needs to quickly respond to changing geopolitical circumstances, and that the single market is a powerful tool in that regard. It will be interesting to see if and how the EU member states will work with these proposals and how this will impact on us. We will make sure our voices continue to be heard in that debate and looking out for our own interests. NATO is obviously the backbone of European security, and the current circumstances demand that Europe does more. The war in Ukraine has generated allied strength, crucial and must continue until victory and just peace. But it has also revealed several weaknesses. European allies need to continue to strengthen their own defense capabilities and work closer together to address hybrid security risks. Economic security is an important part of this. The COVID pandemic and Russia's war clearly demonstrated that Europe needs to reduce vulnerabilities and secure its value chains. If not careful, trade dependencies can turn into leverage, and I mean that to our disadvantage. That we do not want to see, and we really need to be. This is also important for us, but this again is also worrying, and for Iceland with quality of life based on our export goods and open economy. And again, this structure that I'm mentioning here and the reality we have here in Iceland and the quality of life is based on open economy, but that structure, again, is based and totally relies on multilateral system and international law. So when that is being attacked, that must be the focus area, and that's why I understand completely this development, but it has its challenges on the open economy, which stands on that foundation. And in such times, it is essential to have a strong foothold. As I said in the beginning of my speech, we live in a world where dark clouds are amassing. In security and defense, Iceland has such foothold in our NATO membership and through the bilateral defense agreement with the US, as well as increasingly through Nordic defense and security cooperation. In trade and economy, the EEA agreement remains key, securing access to our most important markets, as well as security of supply. Our numerous EFTA free trade agreements and bilaterally with as different countries as India and the Faroe Islands continue to be a solid base for our external trade. Many of my foreign minister colleagues in other countries would argue that this is an inevitable position for small state, which they could eagerly accept. I sometimes wonder if those who criticize the EEA the loudest may have lost sight of this bigger picture. Some complain about the avalanche of EU legal acts adopted in Brussels. Well, as a politician, I know firsthand that the bureaucracies can be quite overwhelming, to put it mildly. I would be the first to support policies that reduce unnecessary restrictions and increase individual freedom. This is a work that we've undertaken domestically, but the EU really has to do better here as well. And this is something that the EU has admitted itself and needs to act on it for all the area and for the things that I have just mentioned. But at the same time, I am certain that if we had 29 different trade rules and regulations with all their complications and complexities, the situation would be worse, and that's the big picture. This would also affect trust towards doing business in Iceland, as we would no longer be able to say that we have the same trade framework as our partners in the EEA. I have yet to meet a businessman or a businesswoman that prefers 29 bilateral trade agreements to one. And I hope I can't never find one, and I don't think so. And I have a hard time believing that such a complicated puzzle beats the simplicity of a single market. But again, the single market can't be made too bureaucratic. Then there are those who seem to want to abandon the EEA cooperation altogether when legislative acts emerge that may not entirely fit Icelandic circumstances, or just not at all. And respectfully, I beg to differ. Of course, there are always issues that need to be monitored, examined, and resolved, but there is no need to panic. If one radiator in this hotel turns cold in the middle of the winter, you don't tear down the whole building, you fix the oven. And sometimes I actually compare this to, because we have a road system here that is being developed, probably too slowly, but it's not a long time since we had gravel roads all around. For me, the EEA agreement is like a highway compared to the older times when we had gravel roads. And you can say that when you're driving on the highway, sometimes you get stones, sometimes they're tiny, sometimes there are many, many tiny ones, and it gets frustrated and you want to push them out. Sometimes you get a big one, and then you need some actions to actually get it out of the way. But you never want to crack down the highway and get the gravel road instead and say, well, now we don't have any rules and regulations from the EU, we have our own, and we have our own gravel road. That can never be the right decision for Iceland, to choose to have a clear access to a market of less than 400,000 compared to have an access of 450 million market. That's the big picture. Fact is that the EEA agreement is Iceland's most important trade agreement with our most important markets. For 30 years, it has facilitated external trade and strengthened our competitiveness. It is also a fact that in recent years, we have reinforced our work both in Brussels and in Reykjavík. We are now closely monitoring the EU legislative process to identify issues and proposals that may require active involvement on our behalf. Obviously, the EEA cooperation is not beyond criticism, and the EU is far from perfect, but actually, and neither are we, for that matter. But if we continuously magnify the challenges and downplay the benefits, if we ignore the bigger picture, we risk finding ourselves in a situation where the alleged solution is far worse than the alleged problem. My conclusion is therefore, now is not the time for foreign policy adventurism. And dear guest, it has been said that the best way to predict the future is to create it. I think there is considerable truth to that. We therefore need to safeguard and develop the EEA agreement. Our task is to follow closely what is happening on the EU side and within the internal market with our EEA interests in mind. We should continue to consolidate the successes already made and build on, this one, okay. And build on them for the future. The access to the internal market remains key to our long-term economic security and continued growth. And we should always aim to be active and responsible partners. We have repeatedly shown that we are competitive in European cooperation, both in the market and in the programs. And this is how we best secure Iceland's interests. So happy 30th birthday, and happy 30th plus birthday, Lucy. May the cooperation live long and strong, and I thank you for your attention, and I hope we all have a good seminar. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Agreement on the European Economic Area and our close partnership with Iceland throughout these years. The EEA Agreement is truly a unique framework and the backbone of a special relationship between the EU and its close and trusted partners. The agreement extends the benefits and rights of the EU's internal market to your citizens and businesses. At the same time, the European Economic Area is not only a partnership in trade or businesses, it is also a partnership of values, a crucial achievement in today's geopolitical reality, as common challenges require common European responses. Over the years, Iceland's successful participation in EU programs has brought tangible benefits for your researchers, students, and cultural organizations, boosting investment, innovation, and job creation. This year, we also mark the 40th anniversary of the EU Research and Innovation Framework Programs. Iceland has been associated to the programs since 1994, achieving impressive results with almost 1,000 grant agreements and a program contribution of over 315 million euros. I'm impressed by the very high success rate of eligible Icelandic applicants, which at over 25% is well above the EU average. Icelandic young people, learners, teachers, youth workers and organizations have been active in our Erasmus Plus and European Solidarity Corps programs. In the past 10 years, around 19,000 participants and over 650 organizations from Iceland have benefited from these two programs, establishing dynamic contacts with their peers across Europe and beyond. Iceland continues to nurture its rich cultural landscape and empower many talents through the participation in the Creative Europe program. In 2021, for instance, Ms. Zeirun Patsdóttir won the European Union Prize for Literature with her remarkable work, Embroidery. These few examples illustrate how together we continue building a more vibrant and innovative Europe on all fronts. We look forward to strengthening our cooperation with Iceland in the next 30 years and beyond. I wish you a successful conference today.
Yep. Thank you, Minister, for your talk, and our gratitude to Ms. Ilyana Ivanova for her message to the meeting. But now our next speaker is Ms. Lucy Samchoa Hall Allen, Ambassador of the European Union to Iceland, and happy birthday. Now we have to the. Now we can say that as well. Right after Lucy's talk, we will have another presentation on video. Ms. Áslaug Arna Sigurbjörnsdóttir, Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation. She will give a presentation through the internet. So, Lucy, welcome.
Thank you. First of all, dear Minister, thank you very much for your opening intervention. You gave us already a lot of food for thought, and thank you also for your kind wishes. It's true that thanks to the coincidence of dates, I can say probably for the last time in my life that I celebrate 30 today. Dear Minister, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, 30 years, 30 countries, nearly 500 million people. And I'm not talking about the Eurovision contest, but about the world's largest internal market, the European Economic Area, the EEA. What a great achievement for us to celebrate here today. I'm very happy to see a full room and to see that so many of you have joined us for the seminar, in which we would like to focus on the many achievements of the agreement, which is also the bedrock of the extremely strong and constructive partnership that exists between Iceland, between the EU, and between our 27 member states. But at the same time, I look forward to discussing how we can build further on what we have and strengthen our cooperation even further. How do we future-proof it for the coming decades and the ever-changing challenges which are coming our way? When the agreement entered into force in 1994, it gave Iceland full access to the European Community's internal market and its 4 freedoms. Today, the EEA is the world's largest single market with, like it was said before, more than 450 million people, 23 million businesses, with an annual GDP of 14.5 trillion euros. Here, I won't even attempt to convert it into krona. And representing roughly 20% of the world's GDP. The 30 states of the EEA are undeniable one of the most attractive places to live and to do business. Today, Icelanders can, and indeed they do, travel, live, study and work across Europe. Icelandic businesses, large and small, can expand their customer base and exchange products and services. Economies of scale mean that many Icelandic businesses can grow into truly global operators. But I should say that the same works in both directions, and EU citizens and businesses enjoy broad and easy access to the many opportunities offered here in Iceland. Many of the freedoms and opportunities provided were only a dream for our parents and grandparents, and nowadays, indeed, they might be taken for granted, at least by the generation who grew up in this new reality. I think in hindsight, many decisions taken in the past seem to be the natural, evident, or perhaps the only possible choice because they were subsequently validated by their outcomes. That's why we tend to underestimate the vision and the drive and the perseverance which was necessary to achieve the outcomes which we enjoy today. So let me just very quickly take you back. It's the year 1989, and Jacques Delors has just proposed a new structured partnership between the European Economic Community, the future EU, on the one hand, and EFTA on the other hand, complete with decision-making and administrative institutions. And let's be fair here, this was a bold idea. And putting it into action was anything but easy. In fact, one of the chief negotiators at the time remarked that this was the most complex feat by the European Commission that the Commission has ever been involved in, and trust me, we've done a few. Negotiations were bogged down by disputes over fishing rights, over transport arrangements, over financial support. The EFTA countries had to adopt on internal market alone more than 1,400 legal acts. When the agreement was finally signed in 1991, the European Court of Justice shut down some of its provisions, leading to yet more negotiations ahead. Even when the agreement was signed in Porto on the 2nd of May in 1992, the ratification process wasn't always smooth. Even here in Iceland, public opinion was split, and the topic proved somewhat divisive between and sometimes even within political parties. That's why the outcome wasn't quite certain until the vote of ratification. Therefore, I would encourage that when we celebrate the achievements of the EEA cooperation, let's also celebrate the vision and the people who made them possible at the time. Now, I don't know how many of you in the room have read the EEA agreement. I won't be testing you, and I accept that reading international treaties is perhaps a niche hobby. But to those of you who did, these words may be familiar. And I quote, "Convinced of the contribution that a European Economic Area will bring to the construction of a Europe based on peace, democracy and human rights." This is the first sentence of the preamble of the agreement. It doesn't talk about trade, it doesn't talk about tariffs, it doesn't talk about GDP, it speaks of values. While economy and prosperity were certainly important considerations in the construction of the EEA, the agreement was always a means to achieve much more than that. It reinforces our common values. It re-emphasizes our common commitment to an international order which is based on jointly agreed rules. These values are evident in the ways in which we, as nations, work in a collaborative spirit, rather than seeing the world as a zero-sum game where some need to fall to the bottom for others to rise. The reference to democracy in the preamble makes another important point. Although the agreement is concluded between states, its purpose is always, first and foremost, to benefit our citizens. The agreement stands for continuity and stability, irrespective of temporary political undercurrents on either side. In the troublesome geopolitical context of today, the agreement is an excellent model of cooperation between close allies. To date, it is the closest partnership that the EU has with any group of countries anywhere in the world. Don't get me wrong, the agreement is not a panacea, it's not a solution to all challenges we face. And as a realist, I know that inevitably in any long-term relationship, there are times when the relationship is tested. There are moments during which our expectations don't align. But we have proven time and time again that we are able to work through difficult times in a cooperative spirit and arrive at win-win solutions. Over time, the agreement has proven to be robust, dynamic and flexible, able to adjust to changes such as the addition of 10 new member states to our union 20 years ago. The area has widened geographically, but also in substance, as legislative acquis has grown in order to help us keep pace with the challenges in new areas, like climate, health, or quickly developing digital markets. Today, as we celebrate 30 years of shared history, it is also a good time to look ahead with strategic foresight. How do we ensure future prosperity? How do we balance the trade openness, which we are known for, with safeguarding our economic interests in global competition? How do we improve joint resilience? How do we approach new and emerging technologies like AI? Looking at the opportunities ahead, I am happy to see the interest from the side of Iceland to continue on this path and journey with us, looking at initiatives like IRIS2 for secure connectivity services via satellite. Another example of a future-looking initiative is InvestEU. Earlier this year, we were here in Reykjavík launching this program, which aims to mobilize more than 372 billion euros of public and private investment to boost economic growth, job creation and innovation. Later this morning, you will hear about Iceland's successful participation in EU-funded projects and programs in more detail. Let me just underline that Icelandic organizations have been exceptionally active, valued, and very much successful partners in various EU programs for 3 decades now. Almost 10% of all Icelanders have benefited from the Erasmus program, and I'm sure that many of you here in the room have done exactly that. Now, we are at the beginning of the program, and I should not jump ahead, but I will use this opportunity to also invite you to Kolaporti this afternoon for a public celebration and an open fair showcasing successful projects, as well as the culture, food, and drink from EU member states. And I also hope that you will join me right at the end of the seminar for a symbolic toast at our Europe Day reception. Thank you.
Dear guests, I wish I could have been with you today to celebrate this milestone. Duty brought me to Berlin, but I would like to use this opportunity to reflect on a pivotal aspect of Iceland's engagement with the European Economic Area, our EEA agreement. Our participation in the European Union's cooperation programs. While the initial focus of the EEA agreement may not have been on education, the provision within it have proven to be significant boon for Icelandic society, particularly in the realms of innovation and academia. The benefits of our extensive participation in EU cooperation programs cannot be overstated. It has played a crucial role in the internationalization of Icelandic society, fostering innovation and nurturing an economy driven by creativity and knowledge. One of the cornerstone programs has been the EU Research and Innovation Initiatives, where Icelandic universities, institutions and companies compete on equal footing with counterparts from around the globe. The results of our participation have been truly remarkable. Over the past 7 years, Icelandic applicants have enjoyed a success rate of approximately 20%, surpassing the average of participating countries by a significant margin. Yet, beyond the financial grants received, the true value lies in the access to knowledge development, collaboration on groundbreaking solutions, and the invaluable network that strengthens our knowledge society here. Our universities have been at the forefront of this endeavor. Over the past 3 decades, they have evolved into vibrant hubs of international exchange, welcoming students and scholars from around the world. Now, with the European Union invitation to participate in the European Universities Initiatives, Icelandic institutions are poised to further integrate their activities and enhance cross-border collaboration for the collective benefit of students, faculty, and the broader knowledge community. This collaboration aligns seamlessly with our national aspiration, particularly our goal to position innovation as Iceland's 4th largest export sector. Whether we consider the enrichment of human capital through international cooperation, the competitive edge gained in research, or the strengthening of our university ecosystem, the EU's cooperation program have been instrumental in advancing our national agenda. We take pride in the success achieved through our partnership with the European Union over the past 3 decades, and we approach the future with optimism. As we continue to harness the opportunities afforded by EU cooperation programs, we remain committed to furthering Iceland's position as a global leader in innovation and knowledge creation. In conclusion, let us reaffirm our dedication to leveraging the benefits of the EEA agreement to propel Icelandic society forward. Together, let us seize the opportunities that lie ahead and continue our journey towards a future defined by excellence, collaboration, and prosperity for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, Minister, for your talks. We now move our eyes to the EEA grant and this important project that has been developing through the decades. We start with a short video, which I hope will show up. Yes, thank you.
Research shows that participating in organized sports has a range of benefits for children, particularly those living with intellectual disabilities.
We worried that he could not be included in sports and with other friends when he was born because we didn't know anything about Down syndrome.
The EEA and Norway grant supports competition for children in Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Bosnia-Herzegovina and Iceland. There is a focus on inclusion and all children are welcome to participate.
Today, my team, Hótel Special Olympic, is competing in a tournament here in Iceland. There are over 1,000 kids participating in this tournament, and it's important for us, as the only Special Olympic basketball team here in Iceland, to be part of this.
It means a lot to Hilmir to be able to play one of his favorite sports with his colleagues. For us as a family, it means a lot to see our son make new friends and connections. Hilmir has grown as a person and his confidence has grown a lot in so many ways.
Over 5,000 children have participated in sports competitions organized through the EEA and Norway Grants Regional Cooperation Fund. The impact of these events goes beyond the field, building confidence and communities across borders.
Yeah, and now I want to welcome Mr. Borgar Þór Einarsson, Deputy Managing Director of the Financial Mechanism Office in Brussels, and he will tell us more about the EEA grants. Right after your talk, we will have another video on the grants. Thank you.
Minister, Ambassador, Excellencies, dear guests, it's truly an honor and a pleasure to have the opportunity here today to take part in celebrating the 30-year anniversary of the EEA agreement. An agreement that has rightly been described Closed.
Yeah, afsakið.
As I was saying, and the agreement has been rightly described as one of Iceland's most important international agreements. And as the Minister mentioned, an agreement that has truly and significantly contributed to the progress of this nation in the past 30 years. As the Deputy Managing Director of the Financial Mechanism Office, which is the Secretariat for the EEA and Norway grants, I welcome the opportunity to speak to you about the role of the grants in the big EEA picture. And it was appropriate that we started to highlight just now one of the grants, more than 6,000 projects running during this period, this current financial mechanism. Before we move to the why we do what we do and how we do it, we should first look at what the grants are in a nutshell. We have, the grants are about funding programs in the beneficiary states. We have two mechanisms running in all of the, in the beneficiary states. And the 2.8 billion euros during the current mechanism, which is called the 1421 mechanism, is the sum of the EEA grants, 1.5 billion euros, and the Norway grants, 1.3 billion euros. Norway grants are financed by Norway only and are allocated only to those 13 beneficiary states that have joined the EU since 2004. 96% of the EEA grants come from Norway, 3% from Iceland, and 1% from Liechtenstein. And the beneficiary states are the 15 least affluent EU member states. A large sum of the allocation goes obviously to the largest beneficiary state of Poland. It's approximately 800 million euros over this period. Romania has 500 million and Bulgaria a little less. But it's according to the population of each country. But why are we doing this? And now I come to the beginning of the EEA agreement. For the EFTA state, the EEA agreement was about being part of the internal market. But as every agreement, it comes with rights and obligations. Accepting the obligations that were already in place in the internal market, or on the internal market, that the EU states had committed already to reduce disparities within the internal market. This was, of course, an obligation that we also assumed when the EEA EFTA state, when they joined the internal market. One could say, and it has been said, that the grants are the actual admission fee to the internal market. This is our contribution as players, as members of the internal market. And we have two main goals from the outset: reducing the economic and social disparities. But then we have evolved. During the first years, from 1994 to 2004, we had more of a simple model. It was more of a direct funding of the beneficiary states. From 2004, when we established the Financial Mechanism Office, we had the Norway grants also applied. We adopted the bilateral objective to the purpose of the grants. And this is extremely important because we now see growing. There's an increase in funding over the whole period, over the whole area, especially from the EU funds. So this goal has become more vital as we have evolved our operations in the grants. And it's important also to note that from the beneficiary side, the bilateral aspect is the one that really sets the grants apart from other funding schemes, and we will come to that later. How do we do this? There are certainly different ways to achieve the goal of reducing disparities between countries and within countries. One way, as I mentioned, is direct transfer of money and hope for the best. This is not the way that was chosen by the donors, by the 3 EEA EFTA states. With relatively small financial impact in the larger scheme of things, the donors figured out quite early that their contribution would need to be more concentrated, more focused on what they as nations and people really had to offer. And this is where priority sectors and carefully designed programs came from. We have 5 priority sectors in the current financial period. It's innovation, research and education, poverty reduction and social inclusion, environment, energy and climate, culture and civil society, human rights and good governance, and justice and home affairs. The priority sectors are the result of an agreement with the EU side. So the parties to the agreement, they come together, say, what are we going to use this money for in this period? And they jointly decide on the priority sectors. So the priority sectors are actually a result of this joint effort on both sides. We then move to the menu of the programs, which are the program areas. And the program areas are decided by the donor states, following the consultation with the EU. And they are, of course, thematic, and they take into account where the donors actually have a contribution to make, where they can affect in a positive way the outcome of the grants. This is not about, as I said, distribution of funds. This is not about absorbing the money in the fastest, most efficient way. This is the business of results. This is the business of meaningful project. This is to use the money in a meaningful way where it can mostly benefit those who need it. And when we have established the menu, we have negotiations with each member state or each beneficiary state. And in those negotiations, the donors agree with each member state which program they will be implementing from the menu already decided. And also, parallel to this process, there is program development. We adopt the programs to the needs of each beneficiary states, and then we move into the selection of project. And the bulk of the work is, of course, implementation, and following implementation, we have closure. This program cycle is 7 years. So the current period actually is called, as I said, 2014-2021 financial mechanism. Many people wonder about the name of it because it's already been 3 years past that, but we have 3+ years to wrap up the implementation. And actually, on the 30th of April, the current mechanism came to an end in the sense that no projects will be funded after 30th of April. It's the end of the eligibility period. Just to demonstrate a little bit the variety of the projects that are being funded. This project is a center for victims of sexual violence is a response to the lack of consultant services for victims of domestic violence in central Bohemia and to the missing consultant services for victims of sexual violence in central Bohemia and Prague. This is just one example, and this project is funded by one of our global funds. So we moved to a project that is closer to home in a way for Iceland, because here we have a donor partner, EBLA. This is a geothermal energy project. It's backed by the EU grants and the EU funds combined, and it highlights Croatia's shift towards renewable energy. And with Icelandic collaboration, it taps into geothermal potential, reducing CO2 emissions and bolstering energy security. This initiative not only benefits businesses and residents, but also sets precedent for regional sustainability. In Portugal, we have a project that showcases the coexistence of humans and nature in biosphere reserves, addressing threats like habitat loss and climate change. It amplifies knowledge, enhances managerial capacity, and raises awareness through activities like Biosphere Reserve Olympics and branding strategies. Collaboration with Norwegian and Icelandic partners fosters mutual learning and sustainable community building. And this is the project that you saw the video about, and this is one of the projects that we highlight in our Stories campaign. I want to close with mentioning a few lessons learned and challenges and how we look at this going forward. There are, of course, lessons learned throughout the history of this cooperation. We have, of course, countered difficulties. As the ambassador said, there are, of course, times when the cooperation gets a little bit difficult. But nevertheless, we should look at the current period as a very successful implementation during extremely difficult times. And if we just imagine that we are making plans with time of an essence, and then we are hit with an epidemic, and then the fallouts from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which greatly influenced most of our beneficiary states in Eastern Europe, and cost increases in most programs and projects, plus the delays in starting the implementation of the programs. but with close cooperation with the beneficiary states, the partners in the beneficiary states, the project and program partners in the donor states, we have managed to achieve the results to a great extent which we aimed for. And also by achieving the results, we have managed to push the absorption rate to a very, very decent levels. But we are still, and I will reiterate, this is not about distributing funds, this is about getting results. And these are the lessons learned. We, of course, we take a close look at our what has gone wrong, what problems did we encounter, and the real challenges for the implementation of the grants is time. Time is the greatest challenge, and resources. And we have tried to address that in preparation of the next mechanism, where we will try to simplify our processes. And to this venue, and I know there is interest in this room about the bilateral aspect to this, we will aim at making it easier to be a donor project partner than it has been. Maybe a little bit difficult to become one, but at least easier to be one. Going forward, while we are now commemorating the 30th anniversary of the EEA agreement, we stand at the juncture of the current financial mechanism and the next financial mechanism. An agreement on the next financial mechanism was signed on 30th of November last year and is now pending approval by the Council. We are already now 3 years into the next mechanism, so we need to hit the ground running when we get the green light. With lessons learned from the current mechanism, the donors and the EU partners will seek to further improve the implementation and achieve better results. And finally, so I reiterate once again, the bilateral aspect is really what sets us apart. It's the niche of the grants. It's where the partnerships are created and many continue long after the financial period. And that is really the measurement of the success of the grants, to create connection between two people. And it goes very much to the vision that was described both by the ambassador and the minister of this is about connecting people with same values around for the whole area. So we should really try to preserve this aspect of our contribution. And I think it's therefore appropriate that I leave you with reflections from our partners in the beneficiary states on the bilateral cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Borgar, for this presentation. We are running a bit behind in schedule. We therefore have to skip the videos that we had on schedule, but I wanted to. The videos will be available on the link. You can find them on where the seminar is streamed. But we move now over to our last, but not least speaker, Ágúst Hjörtur Sigþórsson, Director at Rannís. Welcome.
Góðan daginn. Welcome. I'm happy to see so many of you, so many familiar faces. We're running late, so I've been asked to cut my speech in half. It has been a privilege to work with the Icelandic team on integrating European cooperation programs into the EEA agreement from the very, very beginning. I've been around since the beginning for the last 30 years. So for me, this agreement and the story of its implementation is a very personal story. It has shaped my career It has enriched my life with friendships all over Europe, with all my travels throughout Europe. It has been basically my life for the last 30 years. And what a joyride these 30 years have been. I want to extend, I'm looking around, I'm not sure if there's anybody who was actually negotiating, but I want to say a personal thank you for those who had the vision, as our ambassador mentioned, who had the vision to include the cooperation programs in what was initially a trade agreement. They integrated what we are now starting to refer to as the fifth freedom. The free movement of knowledge, of innovation, of research and education. And that has been sort of the backbone of my career. But as has been said here, this has not been just my journey. 10% of the population has joined in the journey. And that shows a remarkable engagement of the Icelandic population. But even more astounding to the 30-year-old me at the beginning of this process is the fact that today, every year, twice as many people come with the support of the European programs than we send out. I never thought 30 years ago that we would become this popular. But we are, and we have been, as has been said, very, very successful. 30 years ago, I had just returned from Canada, where I was doing graduate studies. And I was young, and I had this hope that the Icelandic society would evolve into a multicultural, knowledge-based society and economy. And I believe, standing here 30 years later, that with the EEA agreement, these hopes have been realized to a significant degree. It has been a game changer, as the excellent, not just minister, but a former Erasmus Plus student so eloquently said in her speech. She's a very good ambassador for the program. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip what I was going to say about the programs. You'll have an opportunity to meet many of the good representatives of the program later this afternoon. I just want to emphasize, because some of you know me for liking to throw numbers around, and there have been some numbers around here today about how many million euros we've got, etc. But the true value of the engagement in these programs transcends the numbers. It is imprinted in our society, sort of a collective European identity that is emerging and that we are engaging. As has been said, half the population of Iceland only know life in the internal market with the freedoms that it comes. And it's not a given, so we must all work to preserve it. So finally, I said I've been part of Team Iceland now for 30 years. And what a team it has been. So allow me to end by thanking the team. More than 10 years ago, the Icelandic government decided to develop Rannís as a one-stop shop for all the European programs, to merge it all together. And I think that is part of why, in particular, in the last 10 years, we have become very successful, as has been said here. So I want to thank the team that I now have a privilege of leading, who have been organizing this today. I want to thank them, and some of them have been with me for quite some time. I want to thank them for their commitment, for their hard work, and an unrelenting enthusiasm for bringing Europe to Iceland and Iceland to Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, August Hjörtur. We now turn to end this session with a panel discussion where the speakers are asked to come to the stage, and Björn Malmquist will take over and lead this first panel discussion on the achievements and future of the EU cooperation. And then we move on with further panel discussions. So welcome, Björn Malmquist.
Thank you, thank you. Can anybody hear me? Everybody hear me? Bara eins og þið viljið. I'm Björn Malmquist. I'm the Brussels correspondent for the Icelandic National Broadcasting Service. Lucy talked about a niche hobby. My niche hobby is tracking whatever's happening in EFTA and in the EU. And we're gonna do a mini version of the panel here to begin with. I wanted to. Obviously, these people don't need any introduction, so let me just get right to the points that I've been preparing. I wanted to start by asking you, Ambassador, and you, Minister, you talked a lot about the benefits of the EEA agreement, 30 years, 30 states, and all that, but I wanted to challenge you a little bit beyond what you said in your speeches and ask you to sort of look a few years down the road, towards the future of the EEA agreement, in times of increased emphasis on economic security, with wide-ranging rules and regulations that have been tending to become more horizontal than before, as in reaching more sectors than they used to, the possible enlargement, the possible changes to the structure of the EU. What does it mean for Iceland, Norway, and Liechtenstein? Do we need to sort of rethink the EEA agreement in the future? Because it seems to me sometimes, sitting in Brussels and watching the discussion, it seems like issues are sort of stretching the agreement at its seams. And so I want to ask you, how does it look like in 5 years? Can we sort of maintain it as it is, or does it need to be changed?
Should I turn it on or no? Do you hear me?
Yeah. You're good.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, I would not describe myself as a specialist on EU development. So, of course, how the EU will develop will affect us, but we should definitely have our independent view on our participation with the EU through the EEA agreement. And actually, when you look at all other, just at the system, the international system in itself, you can see that it is very much affected with what's going on now. So I don't think any of us, not even the true specialists on EU development, can actually say how things will develop within the European Union and therefore on the EEA agreement in the next years. But what I can say is that, in my opinion, it is extremely important for us to adapt, to have a closer cooperation, to have a very close dialogue, and to keep in mind the big picture that I mentioned and the vision that the ambassador said so clearly, and others on the States as well. Because this is not, and this is very important, especially now when you see the multilateral system and just the system that we created that was supposed to prevent us from ever having to look at what is happening now again, and it is, that it is extremely important to remind ourselves that this is not only about trade and export and a better quality of life through trade and that kind of thing. This is also about fundamental issues, the fundamental system that has created, and the EU is a very big part of that. So therefore, even though I have no right to have any opinion on enlargement within the EU, I'm just going to say my personal opinion still. I very much hope that, for example, Ukraine, that has been very loud and clear on their path, will be able to join. They've been working on it in shelters from day one. And that would obviously have a big effect on, for example, us. That is just something that we have to adapt to and find our ways through. Mm-hmm. And with this very close cooperation and dialogue, we will just have to find ways for this to develop. One thing, just in the end, I know we're short in time, is what you mentioned, that the EEA agreement is getting broader, and now you have certain sectors where we could say, is this EEA relevant? And we could come to the conclusion that it's not. But then we would have to ask ourselves, but is it in our interest to still be a part of it or not? And this is a political debate. This is a debate between the EEA states and also through and with the EU. And this is going to be a challenge, but nobody said it would be easy. And like was mentioned, it hasn't been easy. But we just have to stick to the vision and why this is important that it keeps continuing in a good way.
Thank you, Minister. Lucy, Ambassador, thoughts on this?
Thank you. Is the mic live? Yes. I would underline that really the agreement has proven over time that it is very resilient. And when the minister spoke in her early intervention, she mentioned that at the time, in 1994, it was a union of 12. It has grown by another 16 members over time. And the EEA agreement absorbed all of these changes very smoothly. And we're not talking just about the number of countries coming in and the fact that they are very different countries. You know, Cyprus is fundamentally different from Estonia, which is different from Bulgaria still. It's also the fact that we were able to enlarge the area so smoothly is also due to the nature of the enlargement process. And it's true that sometimes candidate countries complain a little bit that it's taking too long and we are too rigid and we are too stringent and we are too demanding. But we are demanding for a reason. It is precisely to make sure that at the time that a new member joins the EU and consequently the EEA, they are fully ready, not only in economic terms, but also that they have the strength of democratic institutions, that they have the independent judiciary that is required, and that truly any new entrant to the club is fully ready at all fronts at the moment of accession. So, in my view, I think that enlargement also in the EEA area can really only be a good thing looking ahead. We have been tested by other things as well. We have been tested by the economic crisis in Europe, 2007 to 2008, by the banking crisis here in Iceland. We have shown resilience during extreme testing times. Now you asked, Björn, about economic security. I think on this front, I don't really see big challenges for the dynamics inside the group, so between EU and non-EU EEA member states. I think it's very clear that nobody wants more protectionism between us. And it is in our interest, on the contrary, to be a strong bloc and a cohesive bloc. But what we will rather have to consider, and I mentioned it a little bit in my intervention, is how do we, as a bloc of 30, protect our interest against, for instance, unfair market practices, whether it's WTO incompatible state aid, whether it's issues with technology transfers, etc. So I'm an optimist. I think that we have shown an ability to grow and adjust, and I believe that we will continue to evolve in the same spirit going ahead.
Thank you, August. Just sort of in this vein, but on a different sort of premise. I mean, obviously, you know, our participation in all these programs, research programs, has been massive over the last 30 years. But we talked about sort of the undercurrents in the EU these days, you know, the emphasis on economic security, on security in general following the invasion of Russia in Ukraine. You're now sort of preparing for the next period, for the next funding period, for example, in Horizon. Is this having an effect on sort of how that will look like? And are there challenges in regards to how we will approach this, following this?
Yes, there are challenges, as the Minister mentioned. I mean, there are maybe more and more areas that where there's interest to use the cooperation program to address which are maybe not EA relevant. Defense is one of those areas. And here we will look to political guidance. But let me make 2 points. I think the programs will be important in helping addressing these challenges. When I got onto the scene 30 years ago, the story was told to me that why mobility programs? Because people who know each other are less likely to go to war. That's the simple rationale of the mobility programs. And of course, I mean, these were set up in the late 1980s, the first mobility programs of the European Union. So I think massive mobility program with the new member states will be important part of their integration. And when Ukraine joins, I'm going to be an optimist, when Ukraine joins, I think the EEA grant scheme will be very important in helping them rebuild after the war.
Borgar, the obvious next question: what happens to the EEA grants when Ukraine will join? Let's say.
Well,
we'll have to pay more.
Well, either that we'll have to pay more, or it will be very simple because we will only have one beneficiary state, Ukraine.
Right.
According to the current rules, at least. Now, I think what is often overlooked when we talk about the challenges ahead is that the cohesion policy has actually worked. The countries are getting stronger, and they will be more resilient going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just pause a little bit and think about the consequences of the war in Ukraine. We had the biggest influx of refugees in Europe since the Second World War. There were no refugee camps anywhere. There were millions of people on the run. No refugee camps. The societies, the neighboring states, they absorbed the influx. Why were they able to do that? In part because we have been working closely, both the EU sides and additionally the grants, in strengthening the social fabric of these societies. So it is an encouragement to keep on the same track, to see that the societies are actually getting stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many challenges obviously ahead, but life is trouble, always. And we have to calculate that into the equation. And we have now lessons learned from 30 years, how we can do things better. We know what to put our focus on. But we are on the right path. That is my feeling, and that is what we hear from everyone around in our beneficiary states, our partners. This is not perfect, but we're moving in the right direction.
I want to thank you all for taking part. We're going to move on to the next panel. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you. So I would like to introduce to the stage the next panelists, Jón Atli from the University of Iceland, Oddur Már from Matís, and Laura from the college in Tröllaskagi. Where is she? There she is. Hi. So we're going to talk about the research and education aspect of the EEA agreement. Welcome. So you'll see here the titles. Jón Atli Benediktsson is the rector of the University of Iceland. Oddur comes from Matís, which is, what shall we call Matís in English, Oddur?
Research and Innovation Organization.
Good. And Laura is obviously the headmaster of Tröllaskagi Gymnasium, which is, for those who don't know, is in the northwest of Iceland, just west of Akureyri. Let me start by asking you, Jón Atli. The University of Iceland is the biggest participant in two of the largest programs that Iceland participates in, that is Horizon Europe and Erasmus+, and has received nearly 60 million euros in research funding since '94, so over 30 years. In the last 10 years alone, 40 million euros in research funds. Two questions. How significant has this been for the development of education at the university? And are you perhaps even too dependent on this? I mean, what would you do if this wasn't the case?
Well, thank you.
Big questions, I know.
Yes. August called this a game changer, and we have been looking at 30 years of international research focus at the University of Iceland, becoming an international research university And without the funds, we would be in a much worse position. So it's almost unimaginable how this would affect our operations. But we focus very much on this, and we are getting better at applying. Our success rate is higher, and we are both post-award and pre-award. We are working on this. So for the university, this is really vital. And if we look at the EEA agreement as a whole, I mean, we are talking about, you mentioned specifically the research funding, and we both apply for project grants, and also we can say the ERC grants, the individual large grants. We have been very successful of late in those. We now have 5. We got one in 2008, and then it was just one maybe for a long time we had, but now we are sort of strengthening us there, and this makes us much more competitive. But then you also mentioned the mobility grants, very, very important, working closely with other nations, other universities. We get a lot of students coming in from Europe, and it's an opportunity for our students and staff to go. And the Bologna process, we cannot forget that. That's very important for the universities. That is the standardization of the degrees and the quality assurance and so forth. So the EEA agreement and everything associated with it is very, very important in order to standardize and to make opportunities. So we are very happy with how things have transpired, and losing this money would not be very helpful, I think.
Just a follow-up question. So there's knowledge growing up in the university as to how to apply for funds, how to manage the projects. Are you getting enough support from RANIs, from the government, in order to sort of maintain that knowledge within the university?
We get excellent support, yet both domestically and also internationally, working with our partners. And we are now involved in one of the European university initiatives. Now the aim of the European Union is to have 60 of those. We came in early, and that has also been very helpful to work with other nations and other institutions and other researchers. So both domestically and internationally we gain help. And with the experience of having received these grants, we become much stronger.
Of course. Oddur, Matís is very active when it comes to research and innovation. You're the 3rd largest recipient in Iceland. 2 questions for you. Sort of what kind of a role this funding plays in the process at Matís? For example, the macrofuel project that I was reading about on your webpage, and maybe more broadly how the EU funding has sort of had an impact on the food sector in Iceland, in research there and innovation.
Yeah, it is. It's very well. It is not actually very hard to imagine how it was how it would be without the EU funding, because I'm not old. I remember being without the EU funding.
Okay.
And it was a very different world. The EU funding, research funding, is, I would say, is probably half of our research budget. It's 1/4 of our total budget. So it is very important for us. And also in the early days when we were establishing Matís in 2006, some things happened in 2008, which we all remember. Then it was very good to have some EU funds staying in the bank, and they kept their value while the krona fell to only 1/3 of its value, and that was very challenging for a new company like Matís, and as it was for the whole society. So it is extremely important for us. But I think what we tend to forget, it's very easy to talk about money, but when we look at this cooperation, last year we had more than 500 partners in different research projects. those partners were in 46 countries. Only 100 of them were Icelandic. But I count the university as one, but we had 30% together with the university.
Mm-hmm.
But, and the value of the knowledge that we bring home in those projects is, you cannot put measurement on that. It is only something that you can imagine, and you can see the effect from that. We have been working in project with orange farmers, and we have been moving knowledge from them into the fishery sector. And so there is an old saying that knowledge is one of the few things that grows when you divide it. It's like the trees.
Mm-hmm.
You just take up and you plant it around. Take a bit of the tree and you plant it around, then up grows a new tree. And that is what we are really seeing and experience through this European cooperation.
From orange farming to fish farming?
Yes, no, to fisheries.
To fisheries,
yeah.
Okay. Probably too long of a story for this panel, but, but let me just ask you a follow-up question. So I mentioned the macrofuel project. Give us just a tiny, very brief description of what it is and how this funding plays into it. What is this?
Well, I cannot go very much into depth of the macrofuel, but it is really much about this new way of thinking about energy and where you're going to get new raw materials. And for example, if you look at both fuels and if you look especially at another big problem which we are facing, which is the fertilizer, then you can see we import all fertilizers that we are using.
Mm-hmm.
But in our waste, you have the raw materials to make more fertilizer than we import. So there is a lot of things to consider there.
Good. Laura, your school is in Tröllaskagi, which is actually one of my favorite place names in Iceland. It's very active in the Erasmus Plus program. You've made an effort to sort of incorporate European cooperation in the schoolwork. Give us sort of a brief overview of what you do over there within the Erasmus sort of.
Yes, thank you. When you come to a birthday party like this one, you reflect. And when I was reflecting there, going through the member states, I have this school in a town with 800 people in northern Iceland, and there are only three states that I found that we haven't visited or have visited us. And for a rural community and students in this community, it matters.
Mm-hmm.
And also, although we are in a small town with 800 inhabitants, we have 500 students because we work a lot online. So we have developed online collaboration, online work, online learning, and online teaching. So this is important in that sense. But another basic thing is the new curriculum for the upper secondary schools. So we went from a very ancient school system to a very modernized, and we are still developing that. And that meant that once we got a grant for a project, we could develop it into the education, and it became part of the education, but not an extracurricular fun party traveling. And that is important because I see the change in students. They are 16 to 19, more or less. You see a change in, you have a student that have been born in this town, love sports, skiing, usually they have been there. Their travel abroad is to travel to a city to shop or to a beach to have a sunbath. And that's their knowledge of the world when they come to us. And I remember the first project we had 10 years ago. It was about lack of water, and we were working with Spain. And then one of our students stood there in the middle of Spain, looked around her, and thinking about that they needed to do something about water, and looked around and said, this isn't Spain. And that is because Spain was beaches, McDonald's, having fun.
Tenerife.
Yeah, something, well, Tenerife, not at that time. But then we realized they didn't want to eat the food, they didn't want to do other things, that they couldn't understand the culture. But today, we have implemented the learning lessons from the culture to see them, and my main aim is that students is the director of the learning, but not a sufferer of learning, and see them how they kind of create their own education to do things. Now there are some of them, students that are here now and just left, they are planning a trip to Greece to collaborate with students they met through this project to continue their friendship. They have created a party, made all the food, decided what should be done, invited the president. Some went out on the fjord and fished. They prepared it, they baked, they did stuff. They planned their visits. They plan the trips. They do it. It's not something that they are handed out. So they have learned to be international citizens, understand the culture. And for example, we had 45 visitors from Slovenia and Norway and Iceland 2 weeks ago. And our students, they welcomed them, showed them around, and gave the first talk. I didn't see the visitors until after half an hour. And then when I asked them, I said, sure, but only for half an hour because we need to learn.
Of course.
So you cannot take us away from that. So after half an hour I came, and the people that they didn't want to let them go because they could debate on their learning, what they were doing, and how they experienced the other countries.
When you sort of look at what you're doing in the Tröllaskagi Gymnasium, are other schools doing the same, similar things?
I can't answer that. You are more or less just a headmaster of your own school.
Right.
But we get visitors from this country, and we actually held a European conference in our schools and got visitors from all over Europe to learn how we do things, especially because we are very modern in our ways to collaborate online. And for example, during COVID, it didn't matter to us because we had all the methods. But still, we found out that among staff, there was this mental stress and other affected us. And then we could use our funding to send our teachers to a course on mental and physical health, and therefore have much healthier staff to take all these obstacles and move them onward. And the opportunities through these grants and what we can do for our youth and for our staff that travels, and sometimes they demand that I take some good teacher from Europe to come to teach us. We have got granted for that to get specialists. And when you live in a small town in Iceland, others constantly look down to you. You are from a small town that is not interesting, there is nothing there. But when you come to Europe, you're Iceland. And this philosophy is rather kind of stupid because Iceland is small, so they should expect the same treatment elsewhere.
And Jónatli, so in a couple of years, you're going to be getting these really international students from the Tröllaskagi Gymnasium already having been sort of trained up in thinking globally, thinking internationally. So it's all going to sort of rhyme together, doesn't it?
It's excellent, and it makes us much more competitive, I would say. So I really embrace that.
Thank you so much, the three of you. We're going to move on to the next panel, which is... So we're going to talk about culture, creative industries, and youth. We are thinking about the Creative Europe program, of course. I would like to welcome to the stage Heather Millard, Gunnar Sigurbjörnsson, and Áslaug Thorlacius. Heather is, I haven't really didn't really think about Compass Films before. Animation Studio Iceland, exciting company. Hi, welcome. Áslaug, Gunnar. So obviously Creative Europe plays a huge part in the work that you do. Heather, your company Compass Film has been active in the film industry here in Iceland for 10 years now. I checked out your homepage. You're producing a new thriller called Cold.
It's already released.
Oh, released already? If we can sort of use that project as a case study, how does the EU funding in Creative Europe affect that, both in terms of production, but also maybe in terms of distribution?
Sure. Perhaps it's better. If I can change our case study already.
Of course, you may.
Our latest production, Ljósbrot, or When the Light Breaks, received Creative Europe co-development funding. And part of this funding is a requirement to work with at least one other country within the EU or the EEA. So we were working with France on that production, and development funding for the film and television industry is really instrumental. Of course, we can secure some development funding in Iceland, but it can really help to strengthen the creative collaboration and the strengths that other countries can bring onto that production very early on. And furthermore, from the very early development stage of a production, film or television or games, it also helps to strengthen the distribution of that project.
Right.
So it's forcing us in a good way to think about creative collaboration, distribution, and for Icelandic projects, of course, strengthening how many countries the film or series or game can be released in later on.
So I read somewhere that, for example, the film Dýrið, which came out, 2 years ago, got some funding to, for distribution, and it was shown in 30 European countries. Probably the same case with whatever you're, and with whatever you've been doing in recent years, right?
Sure. I mean, we're at that point now where we've just finished the film and it will premiere next week as an opening film at the Cannes Film Festival. So that's sort of a really strong achievement for Iceland in itself. But the distribution part will come in the coming months, and it's definitely our intention with our distributors and sales agent to apply once more for distribution support.
Right.
But what strengthens the productions that we work on is, of course, securing extra money, but it's really that creative collaboration with working with other countries and forcing us to, in a good way, to secure distribution in as many countries within the EEA as possible. And with that brings, of course, shared knowledge and everything.
Of course. Gunnar, the youth sector, you come from the youth sector, you work in Árborg, which is, if I remember correctly, the Selfoss area, right? The youth sector has participated quite actively in European cooperation, especially through the work of local authorities. So what is the significance of the EU funding for the youth sector? How does it affect your work? What is it? What possibilities does it give you?
It's just invaluable. The possibility of taking local youth work and connect it to the international stage and the European stage is so important.
So give us examples. What have you done?
Well, do we have the time? So we are taking young people, both young leaders, but also young persons with fewer opportunities, and taking them abroad or being hosts to young people coming all over Europe. And it's just widening their horizon and make their world bigger. And for now, we live in perilous times, and the misinformation around young persons coming up is so much. And the best way to counter misinformation is real-life experiences, and getting those young persons to see the diversity and also the similarities with other young people in Europe and on the international stage, to see that somehow we want to believe that they will see that we are all different, all equal, and it's that they can see the common ground and also what differs between young people all over Europe.
So how has this, like, for example, I mean, you know, give us a recent example of a project that you sort of organized. I mean, did you get a visit from a specific country? Because you talked about misinformation. I mean, are you referring to sort of preconceived notions of how people are or think?
Somehow like that, the narrative of us and them.
Right.
So like we see, and then they come. These young persons come together and they see, oh, we have young people all over the world has common challenges in being a young person on the way to adulthood. But like we do a lot of projects with people with fewer opportunities, and we do where people with that don't have, I would say, difficult financial backgrounds or even health issues, and giving them opportunities that they don't have in their real life. That we are taking like young persons with autism to Europe, and then they are taking part in big role-playing conventions and group work. It's just so fantastic to be part of that. Like I was as a young youth worker taking part first in 2006, and I gained a lot on a personal level. But right now, being on the level to seeing, like, supporting that the foundation is that the young people can take part in this is much bigger, and and this is something we really value in our youth work, because this when we organize youth work on a local level in Iceland, it's not like that the policy of the municipalities is, hey, you have to take part in this. So, but we have grown in the last few years that, like, for the politicians in my municipality, they can see, like, this is really important, and please go on, even though it's more work and there's a lot of, my mayor is out there smiling there, that they can see, there's a lot of hassle as well, but it gives so much.
Áslaug, the Reykjavík School of Visual Arts has been quite active in European cooperation. You've participated in various projects. So I like to ask for case studies. Give us an example of a recent sort of project that you've been partaking in, and what it has brought you, what the challenges have been.
I would start by saying that the Erasmus program is just a, like you say, game changer for a school like ours. We are running now 4 courses that are offsprings of European collaborations. Actually the school led 2 big programs with a lot of schools in Iceland and in Europe, both secondary schools and universities, and these are programs in fields that are connected with small professional fields, like foreign textiles, ceramics, and then we also have the drawing or illustration and painting, fine art painting. It's the only school in Iceland that is teaching these 4 subjects, and we used to have a quite big textile area here in Iceland, like in Akureyri some decades ago, but now it's very small. So it's important that we keep this knowledge within the country. And these projects that we were leading, they started in 2004 and they ended in 2010, these 2 projects. And we still are working very closely with schools and universities in Europe and our students, because it's not a university, it's an upper secondary school, but these courses are on this we call it 5th level here, but in Europe it is the 6th level, so it's somewhere in between university level and upper secondary school. And our students can still go there and finish their studies and end up with a BA degree, adding 1 or 2 years. So that is something that we've not been working on big projects like that for the last years, but we are always we are proud members of the Erasmus, and we do a lot of Erasmus work. We take our students to trips. And now with the current focus on inclusion, we also can take our students with intellectual disabilities to Europe, which is very important just from the equality point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So you can say that that this cooperation, this funding, has had fundamental effects on sort of, how the school operates. Really,
yeah, I would say that. Just it's a vital part of it.
Yeah. About the creative industries, is there room for anything like, Erasmus type of sort of things there? I'm just sort of spinning here ideas somehow.
Sure. I mean, we often get applicants from Erasmus programs throughout Europe applying to film and television production companies, asking to join us for sort of more work experience. So it is already happening in that respect.
It is happening. Okay. Great idea, obviously.
But it's not something that it's coming from the schools in Europe
of course.
The production companies in Iceland.
Right. So you are benefiting basically from this. From these possibilities of exchanging students, of getting people from abroad to work with you, to learn, to experience what you do.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I wouldn't say it's massively common, but it is happening occasionally.
Right. I read somewhere that there's hardly a television series or film produced in Iceland, or probably in most of Europe, without some sort of a touching point with Creative Europe, at least here in Iceland. Just in general, like, how would it look like if it wasn't for this?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think we've got a high success rate in the film and television industry with Creative Europe media funding, for sure. And it's sort of supporting us somewhere between 2 to 20% of a film or series budget, depending on the size of that budget. Without Creative Europe funding, we would probably have less business, I imagine, probably 20% plus less. But Creative Europe has really, because of the requirements, the eligibility to apply for Creative Europe media funding, it's really helped to strengthen independent producers. It's helped to strengthen the collaboration and the creative collaboration like I talked about before, but it's also increasing the distribution possibilities for Icelandic language and culture across the EEA as well, which I think across the world, in fact.
Which is probably
really instrumental.
Yeah, which is probably the most valuable part of this is being able to sort of distribute and spread the content to various countries that you maybe couldn't if it wasn't for this.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, from a very early stage in a project, it makes that project perhaps more feasible than it would be without the support of media funding.
Yeah, exactly. Gunnar, other municipalities, are they doing similar things as you are, or are you leading the field, so to speak?
I guess why I'm here, because probably we are leading the field. Like, we are taking part in probably around 8 to 10 different projects every year, and probably well over 200 mobilities to and from our municipality. So we're doing a lot. And that's one of the challenges for that, like when I'm talking to my colleagues all around Iceland, that like the problem to start. Like we started with enthusiasm and passion, we just went there, we're gonna do this. But there are other municipalities and other local youth work seeing the benefits of this. And of course there are a lot of municipalities active, but we would like to see that they use these opportunities more, that more municipality does this, and smaller societies and smaller communities see the possibilities this bring.
Yeah. So basically, you are creating, like I said before, you are sort of developing the young people with sort of broad international minds that will then go to the School of Visual Arts or to the University of Iceland or even to Tröllaskagi Gymnasium or wherever. So it kind of all meshes together, doesn't it?
Yes, it starts with like there's a foundation layer and it affects other things. Yeah. Like it affected me as a young person, and hopefully I've been affecting other persons around me, and this goes around and you can really see the effects, and you can really see this really open up young people's minds.
Mm-hmm. I want to thank you all for taking part in this panel. Thank you very much. So the last third panel is we're going to turn our attention to business, trade, innovation. I'm very excited to introduce to the stage the CEO of Kerecis, Guðmundur Fertram, and Kári at Carbfix, two really, really important projects and companies. Sigríður Mogensen comes from the Federation of Industries. Welcome. Sigríður also took over the position of the EFTA Consultative Committee, which is basically the touching point between the industry and EFTA. I wanted to start with you, Sigríður, because sort of look at the big picture to begin with. What do you see as sort of the main benefits of the EEA agreement when it comes to the industrial sector? I know it's an obvious sort of question, but I sort of wanted to throw it out, and the impact of European cooperation on Icelandic companies.
So the EEA is by far the single most important international cooperation that Iceland is in, without a doubt. And it has had a significant impact on our living standards, and we can't really imagine life in Iceland now, our competitiveness, without the access to this big market. This is by far the most important market for Icelandic exports. And why is this the single most important international cooperation? It's because we live on our exports. So the competitiveness of Icelandic exports is the fundamental to our living standards. So you can't really imagine Iceland without being in the EEA. I think we would have to join the EU, and I'm not sure that's really popular here for the public. So I think it's really hard to compare two scenarios: Iceland without this agreement, without the access to the internal markets. But I can state with full confidence that we would not have the living standards we have today without this cooperation. However, there are some challenges, and we need to be constantly vigilant in terms of looking at our own competitiveness, because, for example, with the gold plating of the EEA legislation in Iceland, it decreases the benefits of the agreement, and it also decreases the public support, I think, and the support of society of this agreement.
Gold plating, meaning that the Icelandic authorities or the government or the parliament is adding regulations to the regulations coming from Brussels? That's really what you're talking about, right?
Absolutely.
All right. I have some follow-up questions for you, Sigríður, later, but I wanted to ask Guðmundur Kerecis. It's a massive success story, obviously, in recent years, but you've been quite active in European cooperation, and the company has developed from a research and innovation project to obviously a huge and massively successful enterprise. But give us an idea of what the EU funding meant for you and how it sort of impacted the development of Kerecis.
Yes, maybe if you take one step before that, so we manufacture medical devices, and there is a European directive, the Medical Device Directive, that was recently changed to the Medical Device Regulations, that gives us the same regulatory environment all across Europe. So if you manufacture a medical device in Iceland, you can sell it everywhere in Europe, and you don't need to go through like a medicines authority in every nation, and which is an amazing thing to have access to, and is really makes it's really a one-stop shop. You get the CE marking, or you pass this Medical Device Directive, and then you can sell everywhere. And that's hugely beneficial for small companies to only need to jump to one regulatory hub instead of 50.
Right.
But then, of course, you need to talk to the authorities in every country to get your product paid. But you have the regulatory clearance. But our products, the success of our products is based on clinical evidence, and it's expensive to gather clinical evidence, and clinical trials are expensive. We were fortunate a few years ago to get a support to improve and build stronger clinical evidence by the Horizon 2000 program, and that was a 4 million euro support for us, and that allowed us to start on a big clinical study that we are just about to publishing now, that is going to build the competitive advantage in coming years for Kerecis. So we would not have had the funds to start that study 3 years ago, but we were able to do it with Horizon 2000, and that's going to help build our success in the future.
Kári, Karfis is obviously another massive success story. You've received the largest European grant anyone in Iceland has ever received, 115 million euros. I have no idea how much that is in Icelandic. But give us a broad overview of how this sort of project has developed and what the impact of this funding has been on Karfix.
Yeah, so
something you love to talk about.
Well, so 115 million euros is about 16 billion Icelandic kroner. So it's a lot. It's some of the biggest fish that the European Union is handing out for these big scale-up projects. So it's on par with the entire European funding Iceland received through the Horizon program over 10-year period. So it's a really big grant. And this doesn't happen in a vacuum. We had been developing Karfix for a long time, and we had sort of reached the point we were thinking like, okay, are we just going to own Karfix and brag about it, or are we going to use it and put it, to use and scale it up as a climate solution? So there comes the Innovation Fund, and for those of you who don't know the Innovation Fund, it is funded by the emission allowances that industries pay for emitting carbon, and it comes back into investment in climate solutions. And the European Union selected, or the Commission selected our project as one of these big climate solution projects, and is kind of offering us to be a part of the solution. Right. So first of all, we failed. I mean, every success story is littered with failures. So back then we were only 5 people working in the company. It was really hard, and we knew we weren't entirely ready, but we learned a lot from the experience, and also from the prior experience in applying for the R&D grants. We had sort of built up the competence within the company of people that really knew how to write grants. And this is a special art form, really, that just takes time to kind of master, because it's not only about having a great product. You must also know, that your product aligns with the goals and the values of the European Commission. So yeah, and then the second time around, we actually got it. We also got a small-scale Innovation Fund grant to actually decarbonize the geothermal plant in Hellisheiði, and we built our experience sort of on the accumulated decades of experience in geothermal, whereas other kind of carbon capture companies in the world, they build their experience on knowledge in oil and gas sector. We are completely unconnected with oil and gas, and sort of we use the same, drill wells, pumps, and everything that geothermal uses. So, and just because it's kind of a special day for us as well, I wanna say that we are actually.
It's your birthday? It's your birthday?
It's not my birthday, but we are opening the second generation of direct air capture plant in Hellisheiði, which is these big machines that suck CO2 out of the atmosphere, and Karfix turns it into stone underground. So it takes the greenhouse gases and binds them permanently. And this is the second generation, and it started out as a very small, cute little demonstration project in Hellisheiði, funded by an actually quite a small European grant. Mm-hmm. So it's been amazing to see this go from like a small, cute research project into like an industry, and it will be a global industry if we are to meet our climate goals.
So the EU grants have really been there from the get-go, from the beginning.
It's really has been the oxygen for the Karfix project. I mean, so without them, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere.
Well, let that sink in. My follow-up question was basically, so the Commission is basically placing its bets on you, among others. How scalable is this? How much of a success story could this eventually be?
I mean, this is really, really scalable. I mean, it's normal that it was demonstrated in Iceland because we live in conditions. We have very, very favorable bedrock here that turns the CO2 into stone. But it is extremely scalable. But it's also important to know that, you know, even though we're talking about taking a lot of CO2, both from sources here in Iceland and also from abroad, we are simply connecting to a larger network of you know, emerging transport routes for CO2 in Europe. So there will be more storage sites than Iceland. And transporting CO2 gases, that's no rocket science. We've been transporting gases for a long time. But there are basalts in every single continent, and we are working on projects in North America, Asia, Africa, as well as Europe.
Guðmundur, Keres is obviously a huge success story. We're all very proud of it. How do the next few years look in terms of growth, in terms of export, in terms of markets? Is Europe, you know, going to continue to be a key market in this, or maybe it isn't even?
Test. Yeah. So our biggest market is the US, and the regulatory environment there is very good. So Europe has actually been making their rules for medical devices stronger, and there is more demand needed now actually to get into the European market, which is both good and bad. It makes the technologies in Europe safer, but it's also more difficult for smaller companies to get into Europe. But we have our product regulatory cleared in Europe, and we have sales in some European markets. Now most of our revenue is coming from the US. It's going to exceedingly come from Europe, and so just an example to put, because we were talking about numbers, it's sometimes difficult to understand the numbers. So Keres' sales in the US now are approximately 20% of the export of codfish. So basically, if you take all of the export value of cod from Iceland and you add 20% on top of it, that's Keres' current export value.
And that's the skin of the fish.
Yes, yeah. And over the next decade or so, we will probably add about 5% more, which is going to be value to European markets.
Right.
And we'll sell that and market it through our new single shareholder, Coloplast, that has offices and operations all across Europe. But the Horizon 2000 grant we got was very important for us. We executed a clinical trial there in 5 European countries. We built up knowledge and relationships to key hospitals in the most populated countries of Europe. So the future for Keres is being partly built on the seeds that we did seed from the Horizon 2000 grant.
Yeah. So obviously, you know, Europe is going to be more and more important for you. You're going to be a huge, you know, international company, and then that probably means that you're going to make demands of the Icelandic government towards, you know, how are we behaving vis-a-vis, you know, the EU.
Yeah,
correct.
Exactly, and that's very important. That now we cannot only be receiving the regulations; we need to have feedback back. So we need to have stuff in Brussels that is impacting these regulations and rules.
Right.
And if you are a billion-dollar export company, we need to have the authorities in the nation talking our cause and making our business as simple as possible. Of course, within reasonable. Within reason, but that's very important. And for example, this new medical device regulations, they are very, and you can maybe talk about that. They are actually very restraining on startup businesses. And I wish that Iceland and just the member countries would have thought more about innovation before they implemented the new medical device regulations.
Sirius, you want to comment on this?
Completely agree on that. And I was actually working on the lobbyism towards the Parliament of Iceland when we were implementing the medical device regulation. We were actually pointing out we are taking it a step further than many other European countries, and we were not listened to. So hopefully next time we will be. Just to add a little bit, I mean, investment in R&D is the backbone of the future growth of the Icelandic economy. How do we invest in R&D? We need to have the tax incentives, etc. But we also need foreign direct investment. So we're also concerned about screening of foreign investment. We're actually working towards the Parliament of Iceland currently these days in relation to that regulation coming up. So we're constantly trying to ensure that we keep the competitive edge and competitiveness of the Icelandic economy, because that, along with investment in R&D, will have an ultimate, let's say, will be the ultimatum of how our living standards will be after 30 years from now.
Guðmundur just talked about the sort of the need for representation in Brussels.
Absolutely.
To sort of look after Iceland's interests. You know, the government has sometimes been criticized, most recently during the ETS thing last year, that, you know, it's been criticized for not sort of being diligent enough in looking after and lobbying for Iceland's interests. But I ask you, as a representative of the Federation of the Industries, are you yourself doing enough to look after the industry's interests in Brussels?
I think we have to be honest here and just completely upfront. I mean, I said it in an interview with you actually a few months ago. I think we have been a little bit careless in the last few years. Also the businesses and the industries. We can't just blame everything on the government. I think the anniversary, or this big anniversary here now, makes us want to look back and forward. We need to do that. You do that during milestones. So I think we need to do this together. We can't do it alone. The government can't do it alone. We are the people working for the sectors in Iceland know what our interests are. However, we have now taken the chairmanship of the EFTA and EEA Consultative Committee, which is an important step. So I'm currently the chair. The thing I did taking over as chair was to put competitiveness as the kind of backbone of everything the committee is doing this year. This is not a body that makes decisions, but it's an advisory body. But I think just putting competitiveness on the top of the priorities makes us look at everything from that perspective. So we can do more, the government can do more, but we need to cooperate in this. And we've pointed out many different regulations like the ETS, the CBAM, and the horizontal files, where we need to be more vigilant towards the interests of Icelandic industries and companies than ever before. Because the EU regulation framework is changing, it's becoming more horizontal, and we need to look out for the interests of Iceland in that.
Guðmundur, you want to add to?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I think definitely that Iceland and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs punches above its weight in Brussels. And it's an unfair discussion here in Iceland that there are too many people in the foreign ministry. Because we need to talk, we need to lobby there, we need to have our voice heard, both in regarding import duties, these regulations. We cannot just only be a receiver of regulations. We need to influence them ourselves, and to be able to do that, we need to have more people involved. So of course, I am very interested in a lean government, but that doesn't always work. You know, things don't happen automatically, and if we don't talk our voice in Brussels, we will eventually become disaligned, and it will no longer be interesting for us. So when we will be sitting here on the 60th anniversary, it might not be as positive as it is now.
And the good news is that we have the elections coming up in Europe, and the issue of competitiveness is becoming more a critical issue within the political sphere in Europe, which is good.
Good, thank you so much. I think we're right on time. I will thank you very much for your participation in this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Björn Malmquist, for the discussion, leading the discussion. We have now come to the end of the agenda, formal agenda. And I want to thank you, speakers, panelists, and all guests for coming today and participating in this meeting. But I have two announcements before we move on. We are not only celebrating the 30 years of EU cooperation. Tomorrow is also the Europe Day. And the ambassador, Lucy Samsoa Halalen, is now inviting to a reception here just outside to celebrate the Europe Day. After that, in the afternoon at 2 o'clock, we should all move on to Kolaportið at the harbor, where we have the Harvest Festival, the 30 years EEA Cooperation Harvest Festival. We will, President Guðni T.H. Jóhannesson, he will open the festival, and we will have more than 50 booths of presentations, groups, research groups, embassies, institutes, universities, and others, telling stories about their projects and successes throughout the years. So I really encourage you all to move on after the reception here to Kolaportið to continue the discussion and the celebration. It's obvious we have a lot to talk about, a lot to celebrate, and also discuss how to move on the best way. But thank you all for today, and let's go to the next reception.